Good day, everybody, and we're back. Jacob's PC. We got a couple of, actually a few great guests today. I'll start with Eric. Eric, how you doing, man?
Great. Good to be here.
My man is from Marcus Millichap, Global Director of Capital Markets Group, right? Is that did I say it the right way?
Director of the Global Capital Group.
Yes. Very fancy.
I think it's important
fancy.
that it's Eric Michael Anton.
Oh, yes.
Okay? It's
Yes.
three first names.
Speaking of Eric's,
you know?
we have Eric Brody in the house, Annex Real Estate Partners, right?
Annex Real Estate Partners, yes.
Annex Real Estate
I've
Partners.
only been here for quite a few times, so you don't have it straight yet. Amazing. Thank you
Capital
so much.
Advisory. Capital Advisory. And, then we
And
have,
development.
That's right. We have Dorian Lamb here.
Hey,
from what's going on? We have from Cornerstone Land, right?
Yeah.
Title.
That's right. Title
All right.
and real estate closings. That's
All
right.
right. Let's talk about the market. I mean, we're in distress, boys. We're in distress. I want to start with a very, very big macro level view of where we are at the market. I mean, I'm gonna ask this to the group. Anybody feeling the heat right now? Anybody feeling the turn of what everybody was talking about? Talk to me.
No, I mean, that's actually something I wanted to ask you guys, right? I mean, we all read the news and, we've been hearing about impending doom for, I feel like, quite some time now. And anytime that anybody goes out there and puts a statement as far as when it will happen or when it will come, it passes. So I'm wondering to hearing from the experts, from you guys, to see, what's going on? How much more can you delay? How many more extensions are there? How many more modifications are there?
Apparently, he is doing some deals right now. Okay, there's some refinancings that I'm doing for my clients who have a 20 building portfolio right now that's being refinanced. I'll give you the number. Hypothetically speaking, it's about $150 million, right? So if you're talking about refinancing a distressed portfolio of properties for $150 million, to be exact, it's about 15 to 20 properties, mixed use. Is the market back if we're doing those types of transactions, Eric? What do you think?
Is it a cash in refi or is it a cash out refi or is it a straight refi?
Tell us, before I answer, us what that means for the people that are watching. What does that mean?
So what's happening now in the market, you've got a lot of debt that's coming due. And I'll put it this way to the younger generation whose teachers taught them dates don't matter. Dates matter. Dates really matter. So if you took out a mortgage just before the rise in interest rates, you might be very happy, right? If you secured a 4.5% mortgage for 10 years, you're in good shape.
Right.
If you have a mortgage that's coming due in the next couple months or year, you're going to sweat. You're going to sweat it out. So it's almost certainly the case that your rate is going to be double. If it's an office building, it could be triple, which is shocking. And so if that's the case, and if the value of the building is lower, you're going to have to put money into the deal. In other words, your new mortgage is not going to cover the cost of the old mortgage.
So what is cash in and cash out?
Cash in means you got to put real money into, to pay off the first mortgage.
And why do you need to do that?
Because you can't refinance at the same level, right? So if you bought a building at $100 million and you had a $70 million mortgage, and the bank comes back to you and says, hey, we love you, you're a great operator, but because of interest rates rising and because of the market demand, we can only give you a mortgage for $50 million.
Right. And
so you got to write a check for $20 million to keep your building.
Do you think people are going to do that? $20 million?
They are not happy about it. And this is what's causing many people to sell. Institutions, owners, REITs, et cetera. So instead of putting money into the property, right, instead of that cash in mortgage situation, you might decide, you know what, I'll sell the building for $70 million or $80 million, and I'll take a little bit of profit. I'll take some equity out, and I'll live to fight another day.
So let's be accurate here, right? Dorian asked a question of how is really the market, and we kind of sprouted into, what cash in, cash out means. But let's get it straight. What does cash in mean? Cash in basically means you have money that you have to put into the property in order for the cash out to occur, which is the refinance.
No, in order to refinance.
In order to refinance.
In order to pay off your existing loan.
Exactly. So you have to put cash in order to get the refinance to be approved.
That's
Am I
right.
correct?
That's right.
Okay. So have you seen those transactions occurring?
We've seen those. We've seen short sales. I just did a short sale. In other words, I represented an owner. He accepted an offer, and he convince the bank to take a lower amount for their mortgage.
Tell me what a short sale is for the crowd.
Short sale is when, let's say, you have an office building, $20 million office building, it's worth 18 and the mortgage is 19, right? We might market it for 20. Unfortunately, we only get an offer of 18. The mortgage is 19. The owner says, listen, I'm either going to give you the keys back or Mr. Lender, just, take 18.
Are they going to take them off the guarantee? Is there ever a guarantee?
Typically, this would be for a non-recourse mortgage.
And I'll talk about recourse, but tell us what non-recourse means.
Non-recourse means if you're a good guy, if you have, you haven't done anything illegal, you haven't wasted the property, you haven't done anything the bank
A good custodian of the collateral.
That's right. You've treated the collateral good, but because of the market, the value of the building went down. You can hand the keys back to the bank, and you're not personally liable.
And
if you're personally liable, meaning there's recourse, personal recourse.
Yeah, how do you deal with that?
The bank, you have a mortgage on your home.
Yeah,
your recourse.
All right. Do you hire a lawyer? What's going on?
Always. In New York City, you better have a good lawyer like Leo.
That's right. That's right.
So I went to Columbia Grad School Real Estate Program.
Okay.
The first rule of all real estate forever is
location.
That's an equally important one.
Good. Thank God.
The first rule is never borrow recourse. Never borrow recourse. What's the first rule that every developer breaks?
Borrows recourse.
They borrow recourse.
Well, they have carry guarantees. They take some recourse.
Different recourse. They have maybe a 20% recourse. They have interest guarantees, etc.
But the asset class that you're talking about in Colombia is the non-recourse types of assets that can be non-recourse, which is the office buildings. Or am I incorrect?
We sell all property types. I actually work on all types of real estate in New York City: hotels, office buildings, apartment buildings.
We heard that about you.
Yep.
You're a broker, right?
I'm eclectic. Our team is great. We have one person who's a specialist in hotels. So most people don't do hotels. Anyway, I say it's the first rule that everyone breaks because your project is great. You have the best idea. You have the best design. I'll take recourse. I know it's never going to fail. It's never going to fail. All of a sudden, COVID, interest rates triple. Your tenant goes bust. Banks go bust. First American. All these big banks. Your lender goes bust. I mean, anything can happen.
When is? So I actually have a question. When would someone give you a non-recourse loan that will never have any other springing recourse attached to it? My documents that I read with my clients, and we're going anywhere between, the thousands to the hundreds of millions to the billions. In every single one of those documents, it seems like there's some type of springing or sprouting guarantee of some sort. So I'm looking to understand from you, or maybe the crowd here, what assets are there that you can purchase without those guarantees, if you know.
Banks always want recourse. Right. Borrowers never want recourse. Right. It's just that simple, and it's just a battle. Okay. Right. So when the market's good, and you go to the bank, and you say, "I have a fully leased apartment building. It's in great shape. The cash flow is fantastic. I just put a ton of money into it. New roof, new boiler, new windows." You can probably get a non-recourse loan as the market goes, if the market's going up. Times like today, you're less likely to get non-recourse, but it's still out there.
But let's answer.
And of course, CMBS is non-recourse. CMBS.
Yes, and I'll get to that too. There's carve-outs there too.
Yes.
As an attorney, I'll let you know. But let's answer Dorian's question. What transactions have you seen that are, is the volume having peaked? Is it coming up? Is it percolating? Is it on its way down? What is Marcus Millichap seeing?
And I'll add to that, not to cut you off. But, as a real estate closing and title company, we see the closings, we see the transactions. And, you describe two categories, the forced sale, right, or the short sale. And we haven't seen that volume pick up yet. There are some refinancings, but not this en masse type of, there's refinancings or trades, right? Because we're directly tied to transactions or trades, and it hasn't really picked up yet. So I'm wondering where...
is everybody just sitting around? What's going on?
There's a lot of sitting around. There's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of nervousness.
What are they waiting for?
In a city the size of New York, you're going to see everything. You're going to see new buildings that catch great tenants and are super valuable and make a lot of money. You're going to see a lot of buildings in the Garment Center and other neighborhoods that are vacant or almost fully vacant. Their value is plummeted, right? It's almost certainty that if they have a mortgage, they're going to be in distress. They're going to have to work it out. They're going to have to sell the building. They're going to give the keys back. So you're seeing all of this kind of in slow motion right now.
And why is it in slow motion?
It's in slow motion because this interest rate rise was so fast and the full punch in the face hasn't happened yet. Again, if you secured a new mortgage 2 years ago, you're maybe okay. You may have 8 more years of runway. And if you didn't lose all your tenants during COVID and you have a pretty good retail tenant and you're, strong cash flow, you're fine.
So is this a timing game? And I want to ask Capital, Eric, about that. But before we get to him, is this a timing game?
There's always a battle between the market, is the market going up or down, and the capital markets. Is money cheap or is money not cheap?
So what is money cheap or not?
Money's not cheap now. Money is super not cheap.
Said the senior managing director, Marcus Millichap at Global Markets. So I think we should listen to that one.
I'm willing to stake my reputation on that. No, I don't think it's ever been the case that interest rates have risen this fast.
So
maybe in the 70s.
So let's talk about the capital side. Okay, let's talk about middle market. My man Eric over here got some news. I mean, we talked in August, and we said at the time. All right, shout out to my watch guy Gabriel from Watches of Fifth, by the way.
Hey,
just a quick one. But we said at the time is we're at the bottom of the market in August, or we're going to be at the bottom of the market in 1 or 2 quarters. I mean, we're in the second quarter. Taxes are due April 15. Everybody pay your taxes. I'll get that extension. But, April 15 is coming. And what's going to happen in the second quarter with capital? What's going on, E? Talk to me.
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to understand that, Leo, you put together a great group, right? You've got yourself, you're in the trenches right now, in the court systems, discussing, bankruptcy and workouts and making mediation with those borrowers that are having distress right now. And your business is up. So that's an indicator that the distress is here. Now we got Dorian, whose responsibility is on when that distress occurs. You have liens, you have clouds of title. His responsibility is to see those transactions to see if they can move forward. Then you've got Eric Michael, who's making deals right now in the city. He's telling you that he's seeing short sales and discounted payoffs. That's inherently distress. And I think the audience needs to understand that. You have a discounted payoff, right? You, the borrower, took out debt. Your responsibility is to pay back that debt. You can't pay back that debt. The offer that you get on that asset is less than the balance of the debt. And Eric is saying that bank took that discount. If that's not a fact of people just blow their mind, I feel like it needs to be stressed. That lender took out 60, 70% of what they felt was the total value. And then boom, they're taking an offer less. They're saying it pays for us to take a short sale, take a loss. The lender lost. Forget about the equity. Those dudes are wiped out. The lender lost money. That to me is an entirely new shift in the market. And that's why we're here. And that's what makes this podcast so valuable is this is what is happening right now. Discounted payoff. I haven't heard of that. Let's go back to what you're saying on these springing guarantees, recourse, non-recourse, right? You do have springing guarantees on most construction financing and short-term debt, right. But it's when you do something bad, temporary restraining order on a TRO, springing guarantee, you do something stupid, that impacts the collateral, like you rent it up on a business plan that's supposed to be a condo. But otherwise, it should be recourse capital, right? Recourse, by the way, which Eric didn't state, is more expensive, right? The bank is like, yeah, we'll make it cheaper if you have a guarantee because you're protecting us. You're going to come up with the money. You're not going to go belly up. So we'll charge you less. So people are looking at it and looking at their underwriting and trying to be less expensive. So if the collateral isn't there, but you're willing to stake, cash money up, the bank will make it less. Now, I think the third thing that we were talking about that I think is fascinating is that the market is adaptable. Okay. Everyone's bet today is that interest rates will stabilize and go down. Okay, so money is super expensive. We are looking at the lens of reality with our clients. We are telling them how much money costs. Put that in your pro forma and stop thinking that all of a sudden, the fairy is going to come and make rates lower. This is what they are today, right? Underwrite that. See where you stand in the marketplace. But The market's adaptable. Lenders have to have to lend money, right? So what are you starting to see in the multifamily space, right? He's talking about CMBS capital. Okay, great. But CMBS can be long-term. They're trying to lock you up for 10 years in order to trade that paper on the CMBS market. So what we're seeing today sort of on this multifamily or long-term debt is more optionality. And the latest product that we're seeing that we think is like just really interesting to see how the banks are being adaptable is sort of short-term financing. 3 years, right? 3 years plus a 2-year extension, so 5-year money. Now, what would be the biggest problem to multifamily guys when you're looking at that type of capital? The biggest problem is you always pay a fine when you try to pay off early. So let's say you took a loan, it's 10-year money, and in 3 years, rates drop like a rock. When you go to refinance, guess what? The bank knew that that's what you would do, and they want to make sure that they got their interest, right? So they hit you up with these huge penalties. But now we're seeing these lenders going like, all right, we get it. We understand the product that you need. We'll give you a 3-year loan with a fee of like 3-2-1 on any type of penalty. And then you can take 2-year money because you can make a bet, like Eric was saying, on what will the future markets be, right? Is it that it will be less expensive or more expensive? And the last thing I'd like to say on that is I actually heard Barry Sternlicht say today at Starwood that they may go up. That's actually counter to what we're hearing, where everyone's like, oh, it's definitely going to be stabilized. It may go down a 1/4 point or a 1/2 point. But the fact remains, he just said it may go up. I thought that was wild when I heard it.
What may go up?
Interest rates.
So let's talk about that for a second. A lot of great things that Eric just discussed. I do want to talk about interest rates just for a little bit.
Just my last thing, because
Sure.
Dorian asked us, do you feel the heat? If you don't feel the heat today, consider yourself lucky. Because the head of the comet, the biggest firms, are giving back assets. The middle market is giving back assets.
Is that true? Is that true, Eric?
Oh yeah, Blackstone is giving back buildings and giving the keys back.
And if that's not heat, then I don't know what heat is.
Brookfield, Blackstone.
Are they doing that because
These are
they're a
biggest,
banker?
biggest guys in the world.
Right, but aren't they doing that for their personal relationships
No.
with the bank? Or
No,
why don't they fight? Why don't they restructure? Like, what's going on with that? It's non-recourse. You said, right? You said non-recourse. I want to challenge that a little bit.
Yeah. These are non-recourse loans.
Yeah. So why are they giving back? Why can't they restructure them?
If the value is so much below the loan, they're going to give them back. There's just nothing to do. My experience is that you give the keys back. The business plan didn't work out. You were a good guy. Banks understand that. Even if you file bankruptcy as a small developer, mid-sized developer, a couple of years go by, banks understand that. My experience is when you sue a lender, banks don't like that.
Right.
Even if you're in the right, even if they did something negative, that's going to war with lenders. And
Absolutely.
if you want to keep your future options open to borrow, you got to think twice about doing that.
I like that. I like that phrase because thinking twice is very important. But you have to think. Can you think twice when your entire value of your estate is on the line, right? Maybe you're dealing with.
I buy stock in Brookfield and Blackstone. They're incredibly well-run companies. Their stocks are up. They're making money, right? But there could be, like in LA, they gave back a building or two. It just didn't work out, right? But their portfolios are so huge and their relationships with all these lenders are so important. They're not suing over one building. They're just not going to do it.
What are they doing in the millions and the hundreds of thousands? What's happening there? I think the people want to know what's happening there too.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Eric said with regards to feeling the heat, Eric Brody, Professor E.
It's cute.
Piggybacking on what you said, I think the heat is certainly felt, right? There's no question about that. I feel like my question to start was, when are the trades going to happen? And the handing back of keys and all the stuff that we read in the very big assets, institutional companies, assignments of loans, that's not necessarily a trade between the parties of, different, you know what I'm trying to say. It's not an exchange between.
It's not an arm's length transaction.
Exactly,
it's not.
right?
It's not indicative of the market.
So we're not seeing that. That's what I mean, right? In general, with regards to any sort of level of prolificness. But what have we seen in the last 90 days? A lot of kicking of tires, right? I mean, I know things are distressed because I do the search work on a lot of the kicking of tires. People who are thinking about buying an asset or thinking about looking into.
So how does that work? Tell us how that works. Like Joe calls you and does what? What does he say?
Look, I'm looking at a distressed asset right now. It's an office building in the Garment District, and this occupancy it's nowhere near what it used to be. It was financed in 2019, where values were at peak. Then you have COVID, and then you have interest rates, doing what they did, and it's in trouble. Can you run me, use your title company as an advocate? Can you run me searches, the ones who are astute know, to make sure that they have everything that they can from an informational standpoint? And we see a lot of scenarios in which there's a lot of liens, there's a lot of, specifically mechanics liens, so work that was done.
So these guys or gals that you're dealing with are investors?
They are investors.
They're not in buyers, obviously.
Yes.
They are in buyers as well.
They're buyers and investors.
And investors. There's a difference for the people. An end buyer can probably use the building in itself for a small investment. And there's like serial investors that are investing. I just wanted to make that distinction.
Anybody who's looking to buy real estate would be wise to bring in somebody like you early, so you can not just see the mechanics liens and the mortgages, et cetera. C of O issues, other issues, easements, et cetera.
ECB violations, DOB, LPC, everything.
So many times we counsel people to do that, and they
never do that.
They're excited about the deal and they forget to do it, and then
until
2 months later, as we're negotiating the contract, something bad comes up,
or worse, until they sign the contract,
then really bad.
All this stuff comes up, and now they thought they're closing in, say, 30 to 60 days, but you have curative measures that come out from a title search that can take 6 months, a year, right? That requires a lot of work, and the blame gets tossed around with regards to why is this not closing? They're trying to line up financing, and it doesn't all line up. There's a lot of moving pieces.
And this is the hundreds of thousands and the millions in both?
We're talking in the millions, right? We're talking in the tens and we'll say tens of millions.
Tens of millions, okay. And
any deal could have these problems.
Any deal could. And in the 90 days, I'm doing 90 days. Maybe you want to take it down to 6 months or 180 days. What have you seen in the market in terms of transaction volume versus transaction inquiry? Which is, when I say transaction volume, I mean the deal closed. Then there's transaction inquiry where it didn't close. They're just looking at it, and then they kind of fall off. And then transaction contracting. So if you can tell me that, if you could tell the group that, I really want to see where we're at on that watch. Where are we in the bottom of the market? How are people sitting on the sidelines? Are they? So I want to know transaction closed, in contract, or inquiry. Can you tell us that?
So I can answer that question from the perspective of my company, right?
Tell us.
It's a little harder to get metrics across the board with regards to all the countries.
He told us as part of Marcus. I'm saying as part of Jacobs PC. He's saying as part of Annex.
No, I got the market.
Okay. Well, he'll tell us the market.
I don't play around with just my company. I know the market.
Fine. But tell us
I can speak from our perspective.
You make the market.
Yeah.
that we consider ourselves lucky that on the volume front, we were down only 50% last year, right? So
lucky.
Considering ourselves lucky, right?
It's great that you say that. Like, we just need people to clarify.
Right. So we saw, year-to-year volume go down 50%. How it's projecting this year, it seems like it's going to be very similar, right? We're going to be at that 50% mark. In terms of contracts signed, I know this is not very helpful, but not many. I could say that January and February. In hindsight, when we look back to 2023 now, we had carryover from 2022 that impacted the first quarter of last year. We didn't have that this year. So the first quarter was pretty bad.
Wow.
So we're projecting a similar year to last year. So that would be 50% down.
You know what I would say? That means, in my view, using his company, the Titanic got hit.
Oh, no doubt. There's no doubt about it.
But volume was crushed for everyone.
Yeah.
Crushed.
Right.
The transaction
interest
business
rates were going up.
It's
the
crushed.
transaction business.
So now let's look into the distressed pie, if you will. How long is that thing going to cook until distressed transactions now occur? And maybe I'll take it back to Dorian again. What level of distressed transactions are moving through? Are they trickling up? Because it seems like Marcus Millichap is all up in that right now in terms of the transaction. Giving the keys back, there's negotiations going on, the transactions going on.
Yep.
That has tinkered up. Am I correct?
Things are picking up. I would say 90 days ago, maybe 4 months ago, things were somewhat desperate, negative. Everyone very scared. Things are a little, maybe it's the weather. I don't know.
Maybe it's the weather.
Happy Eclipse Day. But
So Eric, Michael, you said there's a waiting game of sorts, right? And from I would call it a layman perspective, right? Eric Brody, you discussed rescue capital and how the market's adaptable and it's there and they're shifting and kind of changing the dynamics so that it's available. I bring this up because I feel like I've heard the term dry powder now on the equity side for
too long.
For practically the
I want to see it. You got it?
my career.
there's a lot of dry powder.
But
yeah.
just to get to the question is the transactions haven't really kind of with any level of force happened or velocity happened yet. I'm wondering what you guys were seeing. I think
I'll
that's
explain.
A good question
I'll
for you
explain.
guys, yeah.
And I want to talk about from my purpose and from my end what's happening in the bankruptcy market. First and foremost, the restructuring market, I'll call it, in court and out of court. I've got into the space about 36 months ago when things were, in fact, not happening at all in the bankruptcy space. Not one bankruptcy was actually, I'm talking about single asset real estate cases, mixed use, commercial, multifamily, everybody. And now what I see, say, for example, let's go back 36 months. So we're in April right now. April 23, 22, 21. 21, no bankruptcies. 22, no bankruptcies. I'm lying. 22 end first quarter, there was a bankruptcy. 23, 3 bankruptcies. 24, 8 bankruptcies. So we're getting a doubling of the bankruptcies. Now, that's in-court restructuring. Out-of-court restructuring, which is the keys, give the keys back, do modifications, modify my loan, modify my terms, modify my guarantee. 2021, 0. 22, 0. 23, 15 of them. Wow. 24, 40.
And we're in April.
When the government pushed interest rates to 0 during COVID, the early part of COVID, you could refinance, you could blend and extend, you could kick the can down the road. When interest rates quadruple from that level, right, you can't.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. I think when rates quadruple, it's like seeing milk quadruple. You're going to call the wife and you're going to say, do we really need the milk? They'll say, yeah, of course we need the milk. You'll buy the milk. But you're going to think like, oh, this is expensive. This is expensive. I didn't know it was $15, right? So you might make that phone call. I think what's happening is, I think Eric, Brody, Dorian, and myself are getting those phone calls right. Like, listen, things are expensive. Like, what's going on? Is anybody feeling that way? That people are not necessarily transacting; they're more kind of inquiring. Is that what you're getting?
Yeah, it's almost the sense of waiting for the first domino to fall, right? Or I guess it depends on the market as well. But in general, the first domino that falls that gets everything going.
Where do you think that's going? What do you think that's going to be, Eric?
The first domino might have just happened yesterday.
Talk to us.
A month and a half ago, John Gray, who's the president of Blackstone, super smart. I know him personally, incredibly gifted investor for 25 years or
beer
so.
Scotch. Is he a beer Scotch guy?
He's a very calm individual, and he manages $1 trillion of assets. Anyway, I think it was about a month and a half ago. He was on the cover of Forbes magazine as well. He said, now's the time to start looking and start buying because everyone's afraid, et cetera, et cetera. They just bought a $10 billion portfolio yesterday of residential.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now that could be the spark.
And there's a lot of talk of that.
Spark for transactions.
Yeah, just as if the biggest guy and generally, the smartest guy in the room just made a huge bet on residential, maybe it's time to go in.
Now go in. I want to be very clear for the
with
audience.
The dry powder. I'm talking about institutional investors.
But does the stress go in or what? I want to know how you characterize this transaction. That's very important for me, okay? Distress. What does distress mean? I mean, if somebody is buying something, doesn't that mean that we're not in distress?
There's different types of distress.
Right. Let's talk about that.
So
If we
got a call a week ago. And a lender said, we got to get this off the books. Why? Don't ask. We have to sell this. We want to sell it. We want to close in 2 or 3 weeks. That's a distress sale, right? Because they have to sell. They're not waiting for the highest offer over a 3 or 4 month marketing period. We're not putting together a gorgeous book. They're like, sell now. We just want to sell this. That's a distress sale. If somebody has a mortgage that's in trouble and they have time, that's, they're feeling distress. It may not necessarily translate into a distress sale price. So there are a million different examples of all of this. But when you see Blackstone buying $10 billion of real estate, it might be signaling to everyone, aha, it's time to deploy some of our dry powder. Because what I've seen on the institutional side and the private equity firms, they have a lot of money, but they're not using it because their hurdle rates are too high. In other words, if I have $1 billion of dry powder, by the way, I asked the younger guys on my team, do you know what dry powder means? They're like, money. I go, yeah, but what is it from? Right. They had no idea. It's from.
Do you know what it's from?
I do not.
Shooting cannons, bro.
It's from,
gunpowder.
Gunpowder. You had to keep your powder dry.
Right.
To use it when you need it. Right. So you keep your powder dry. If it's wet, it doesn't explode, doesn't shoot the cannonball or the musket. Anyway, so everyone's holding their money and they're like, yeah, if I get a 20 IRR with no risk, I'll deploy my money. Well, that doesn't exist. There's no such thing. So everybody was like this, holding the money.
Because they don't want to be the ones to make the wrong decision as well. If they make the wrong decision, because if you made the decision to start lending credit, because a lot of the dry powder is really in the capital stack, not as common equity, right? That's not where they play. They're playing in first position, they're playing in pref, they're playing in mezz. That's where they want to play, right? And in that space, if you had deployed thinking that coronavirus was the catalyst, guess what? Those people are being rocked right now. So the same people who have the quote unquote dry powder also just got hurt on their bets that they did when they saw coronavirus hit because it was all short-term capital.
I want to say what I'm thinking, what I'm trying to ask you, Eric, is if Blackstone is buying something for $1 billion or $10 billion, you said? $10 billion. Are they buying into distress or are they buying into positive cash flowing assets? That's what I want to know.
I think their gut feeling is probably like, now it's time to buy because things are going to get better.
That right there is very valuable for the people at home to hear, right?
If you think things are going to get worse, it doesn't matter if it's distressed or not, you're not buying. It's like rich people can buy a nice house anytime they want. They can buy a watch, they can buy a car. If they feel that the housing market's going to keep going down, they'll rent. They're not going to buy a $20 million house that they think is going to be worth 15. Rich people are usually pretty smart and they get it. They get the timing. So it's the same thing. It's really the same thing in all markets, right?
I also perceive they probably got a discount with the reset valuation, understanding where the capital markets were when the $10 billion. That $10 billion on that acquisition maybe was $15 billion at the top of the market or $16 billion. They probably still made the right trade.
So wait, I want to go back to when I said Gabriel's a fifth, watches off a fifth. Okay, talk about
Gabriel the fifth.
Yeah, take about
two shots. Look at that.
Yeah, talk about the bottom of the market. So is Blackstone saying they're at the bottom of the market?
Unfortunately, I wasn't in the investment committee meeting with them. But all I'm saying is it's indicative of the biggest global real estate investor is now making a big bet in the U.S.
We should call a spade, okay? If the smartest guy in the room is making that bet, what Eric is saying is that others will follow now.
No question.
Because they're not the first one to make that bet. If the smartest people in the room or a perception of it who have 1,600 data scientists and they have all the data out there and they're seeing all the trends and then they're saying like, let's lay up 10 billion, guess what? The rest will follow. That is what he's saying. And that may be the spark for transactions. Does it now trickle down to the mid-market space, to the mom and pop, to the mini institutions, to the billion-dollar credit funds? Who knows? Yeah. But now you're not making a mistake, right? These guys have boards that they have to answer to in investment committees. Now they're not the first ones getting their heads chopped off.
It's I call it the Disney moment, right? 20 years ago or more. Disney opened a store in Times Square when Times Square was negative. It was, Times Square. Within like a minute, everyone's like, Disney store in Times Square? I want to be in Times Square.
So the real question, Leo, is what were the signals? That's what you're really asking. What were the signals that Blackstone is reading on the parchment paper in order to make their decisions because others didn't see the same signals? What were the precursors that they're seeing in order to make that decision?
I think the precursors that they see is, like I said, I still characterize this as a distressed transaction because they bought it at the bottom of the market when it was higher. Allow me to explain. There's a property in Midtown. I can't, give you the address.
Remain nameless.
You can tell us. We won't tell anyone.
It is 100,000 square feet or 85,000 square feet. It was trading for $85 million. October 23, 2023, trading for $85 million. I want to ask you something. How much do you think it is trading for now?
Or will trade for?
23.6.
$33 million. You're not too
close.
far. You were close.
Nice work.
Good.
Did it lose a tenant?
No, it did not lose a tenant. It lost momentum. And I think I want to talk about that as well. Momentum in real estate is extremely, extremely important.
Can I challenge you?
Of course.
When you say it was trading for, maybe somebody made an offer, but
Yes.
it didn't trade.
It did not.
In other words, the buyer didn't close, the lender didn't show up, the
Right.
seller didn't get the money.
Correct.
Okay, so it may have never been worth 85.
May have never been
I mean, this
worth
is what we
85.
deal with all day long, and it like
Value.
all
We're
day
going to talk
long.
about value. We're going to talk about
What
value.
I was going to say is, an owner would say, "I got an offer of $50 million." Okay, that was 4 years ago. That's completely irrelevant. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Nothing.
But let me give you the little twist. It was because the reason it was not accepted, it was because the amount of the deficiency, and I'll explain to you what a deficiency is, and with the guarantor was $15 million, and the guarantor wanted to cover their deficiency. Now, what does deficiency mean? Property's worth 85. The debt that is owed is 100 million. 15 million of that is recourse to or passes to the guarantor who guaranteed that debt, and that is why that guarantor did not accept or consent to that sale. All right.
Didn't even know about his taxes on the discounted loan position, that it's income?
That it's also income. When you get that forgiveness, it's actually also income.
Yep.
This is a good reminder for everybody in the real estate game. Please go to your tax attorneys. Please go to your CPAs. Don't think that if you short sale a property and you save $100 million, that you're scot-free. The IRS will send you a bill for $100 million. That'll be at a tax bracket of 40%. Right. You will have the same exact problem. And if you need good lawyers, go to Jacobs PC. But besides that,
Leo, can we back up for a second? Because I think you said something interesting, which is where are we on this timeline of sort of distress in transactions, right? And it has changed because things are moving. So you said earlier in the court system, it's starting to pick up. Outside of the courts, it started to transact. Well, guess what? As Eric was saying, is that the lenders are getting more aggressive. They know that they're stuck. So they're coming after their borrowers, and some of them are out of court settlements where they're giving the keys back. So what we're seeing is the lenders are starting to come to us. They need those players in the game that know enough about capital markets, construction, and development to complete those assets to then go out and get more of their money back. That wasn't happening 30 days ago or 90 days ago or 120 days ago.
Valuable.
We just picked up 2 deals where the lender took it back. That means they foreclosed, and then they needed a principal developer to then finish that asset. That is further down the timeline. Next, do they take it back and then flip it? And then you're going to hear Eric say, we're starting to sell assets where our client is the lender. It just so happens there's no more debt on it because now the client became, the lender became that actual client. So the real question is, hey, Eric, are there more clients coming that were really credit funds that took over the assets that you're now trading it? I'm thinking that is what's happening. We are seeing today that the lenders have foreclosed and they're now underwriting and trying to determine what is the best position to move forward. That means it is moving down the line, and I perceive there will be more transactions as a result.
I'll tell you something else, and I'll pitch it to Dorian. I have a very important question for you. If the representation of transactions beginning, or the confidence in the market coming back because of the $10 billion transaction with Blackstone.
Yep.
I would probably say, and I'll speak for myself, for my office, when we filed the $1.6 billion lender liability claim, is probably representative of the wrongs that lenders also commit when committing to borrowers in providing capital to them. Because in my negotiations with billion-dollar funds, they act in a way that if they've done something wrong, one quintessential example is they tie the funding of a construction loan to an acrimonious list of preconditions and checklists that drop the due date for a temporary C of O even further and further and further, which, until we get new law, the 421 expires June 2026, that's a problem for a developer. And that causes damages for a developer. So I've seen lender liability claims, and I will see more of those claims moving forward for three reasons. The first reason is the lenders have trouble with determining the value of the asset.
Right.
2, determining the value of their asset. What is their asset? Their asset is the actual loan. Remember, when you're a bank, your deposits are your liabilities. Your loans are your assets. So it's the value of the loan, it's the value of the asset, which is the piece of real estate, and it's the value of the guarantor. Those are the three things that if you're in negotiations and you have your lawyer and you're listening to this right now, you should talk to your lawyer and say, look, I heard this crazy guy, Leo Jacobs, say there's three values here. There's the value of the loan, there's the value of the asset, there's the value of my guarantee. Am I being represented as the guarantor? Likely the answer is no, and you should get a lawyer for that because the interests of the guarantor are separate from the interest of the debtor. It's in the debtor's interest to sell its liabilities for less or $1. Why? Because the guarantor could carry that fall. So it's the guarantor, although it may be the same person, maybe not the same person, the guarantor needs competent representation in determining the value of the asset, the value of the loan, and then the value of their guarantee. That's all I wanted to say.
Listen, I think that goes back to what Eric was saying about why are large owners giving the keys back, right? They're seeing the playing field differently and they're seeing it from logic, and it's much more of a military strategy, which is our time and value, right, on that asset is better served elsewhere. So they make the deal with the lender and they don't fight and they can walk away because they are a business and they're thinking about it from a business perspective. Then you said, Eric had stated that, but if you litigate with a lender, you'll never do business in the future. Well, that middle market human is trying to protect the value and their dollars of maybe their future, everything that they've ever earned. So they're looking at it from a much more personal and irrational perspective, and they have to defend themselves. So it's just a different game and a different playing board within which we're looking at it. Yep. Your point about the guarantors is when the middle market is the responsible guarantor, they're not just thinking about the debtor, they're thinking about their families, they're thinking about their future. So you might as well fight. It's your Alamo right now. So Eric's saying, well, what about your future? They can't think about tomorrow. They got to get this done. They got to get out from this, and they'll determine if they can do real estate in the future. My perception, even if you're going to litigate in the future, whatever it is, you have to live to the next day to decide whether you're worried about the future lending or not.
So Dorian, I have a question for you. It's extremely important. You know, are there assets that investors are purchasing that they want to fight with the lenders about? Are they giving you inquiries about that? Like, hey, I know that there's I presume it'd be a distressed investor, and they're trying to get into the Midtown office space, and like, I have a building for $30 million. The skyscraper has $15 million on it. What type of searches are they making you run? What are they making you do in determining, how instructive is title to determining the value of the guarantor, the value of the asset, the value of the lien? How instructive is that search? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah,
it's a very important question.
The title is really understanding any additional burden that's on the value itself, right? So
The value of the asset.
the value of the asset, because you need to know what is in the path or in the way of the path to actually close your transaction. So after you've gotten through the underwriting and the business plan, and this is what I can do with this distressed asset, because look, we work with a lot of developers, and they look at this distressed market as an opportunity to reduce their land bases, right? To get a piece of property for a much lower price, or the price of the buildable square feet for a much lower price than they would have before.
So it's opportunistic, looking at
So
opportunity.
it's a very as you know, developers opportunistic, looking.
So
for ways-
increase have increased in that opportunistic.
Yes, so inquiries have increased, but it.
Why is it hard to transact?
I mean,
Right, the increase you had, and I want to get to the bottom of it. You have 100 inquiries in October. You have 200 inquiries in April of 2024. October 2023, it's 100. I'm using arbitrary timelines, but April, right? So last quarter 2023, second quarter 2024, you have 200 inquiries. And how many of those? What percentage of those inquiries are going in a contract and actually transacting?
Yeah, right now, a very small percentage.
And why? What are the hurdles? I want to know what the hurdles are.
Because at some point you make a determination that whatever is in the way of the path to close, or whatever you unveil from doing additional searches, in our case pertaining to title, so i.e. mechanics liens that are in the millions of dollars, and you figure out that in order to cure it, it's not even the contractor. You got to figure out if there's the subcontractor that hasn't been paid that has filed the mechanics lien, and there's a whole kind of picture that you have to unravel that's generally not presented when they're looking at it from a very top view of, all right, this building is $50 million when it was $70 million before, but now, oh, by the way, there's about $2-3 million worth of mechanics liens that we need to solve. So we feel, or if I were to guess on why it doesn't go into contracts, because they realize at some point that it's just too much. There's too much at that point in time, given what they need to pay for it in order for it to make sense.
So in that, do you advise you? I always wanted to ask this question actually to the title guy. Do you advise on these things, or do you just I hate to believe that you just do this.
No.
Here you go. What do you do?
We can advise on what you can do to fix whatever is in the way. So we call it curative measure, right? So there's a list of 10 items that are problems, whether it could be violations, permits that were not closed. A number of things between all the different city agencies that are out there.
What takes most creativity to resolve? Is it DOB violations? Is it easements? Is it a deed that was stolen? Is it a mechanic? Where do you sell yourself on saying this is what we do great, this is what we do best, and what is the creativity that it takes now to transact in this market?
Yeah, in general, right, where we come into play is things like covenants and restrictions. How do you get around
city restrictions?
Restrictions that could potentially affect what you can actually do with a piece of property, right? Or you come off with nuance, especially in Manhattan, a city as old as it is, where there could be a piece of property that you actually don't know who owns it, right? It's a gap in between four buildings. It's called a gore strip, right? How do you figure out, is there an opportunity for a developer to take that and, action acquired title, take it, add it to their FAR, and it makes a big difference, right? In terms of how they underwrite in general. That's why a lot of developers like to work with us, because we'll run the searches, we'll translate it. Some of these are handwritten documents from the 1900s. And we'll translate it, transcribe it, we'll give an opinion, and then we can advise on whether or not it's actually a big problem.
Or it's actionable, right?
But
I'm sorry, let you finish.
But another one of your questions is like, and what are we doing now?
Right.
It's not so much that the curative measures in our advisory has always been there. It's just that now it's for those who are astute and actually reaching out to a title company. I'm going to quote an attorney, and they said it's like the best $1,500, $2,000 you could spend from the perspective of actually just running a title search, so that you have an idea of how distressed it is from the points of liens and judgments and violations and all that, right? We can talk you through how to get around some of it. And in some cases, we can actually find the curative measure from the title side of it, where we can either accept it from policies. There's a lot of nuance that's associated with that, right? We have 5 attorneys in-house that just work on that in its entirety, right? Here's a set of research. I liken it always to, it's a 10,000 piece puzzle. We've retrieved 9,500 pieces and there's 500 pieces missing. And you either have to live with the risk or find a way to get an answer question or find a piece itself to fill the puzzle in. And it becomes a risk mitigation aspect, which is real estate in its whole, right, in general. But from a title perspective, you're looking at that puzzle and saying, all right, you could live with this. We have 9,700 pieces. We could, close. Or no, we actually need to solve this part of it because it's of this 300 missing pieces. It's all in one section, and it's you can't really piece it together, right? So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. It does.
You know what though? Let's get to the brass tacks of why this is the discussion. Okay, when we talk about interest rates rising, we're talking about litigation. We're talking about we're talking about laws that are changing. We're talking about title risk. What is it that we're really talking about is what's the value of this reset lens of our reality when it comes to valuations of office and retail, the existential, the multifamily around the country, interest rates rising. What is the value so that we can start transacting again? And that's why I'd like to just turn to Eric. How are you determining with all this variability? I know I am. I'm trying to get everyone to look at the lens of reality. This is what the capital markets and this is the cost. You're the one trying to get down to the transaction and the value of these assets. How are you going about it when there's all this variability today?
Yeah, I'm guessing you're getting calls. I need a BOV. Well, how are you doing a broker opinion value on an office building?
People always ask, are you busy? And what they really mean is, are you closing deals and making money?
Right. And you're like, no.
And I always answer, I go, I'm always busy, but I'm not always making money. We're always busy. We're always doing BOVs. We're always doing research. We're always doing market reports.
So increase
in 2023, we did BOVs. BOV stands for broker opinion of value. It's an appraisal without an appraiser, right? We think our appraisals, our BOVs are more accurate than appraisals.
And I'll tell you the legal part of that, but continue.
Because we're looking forward.
So
right?
Can I tell you?
We're predicting the future.
Can I tell you the difference?
Sure.
So in bankruptcy and in-court restructuring, let's go to in-court restructuring real quick. In-court restructuring from a bankruptcy practitioners and those that want to understand what value actually means in bankruptcy, a broker price opinion talks and discusses the value of the property as someone would buy it. That would mean how much will I pay for this cup? Then the appraisal says, what is the value, the intrinsic value of this cup? And you're saying, well, isn't this like the chicken or the egg? No, because in bankruptcy, the asset itself has to be valued on its own, okay? Is there a tenant? Is there a paying mortgage? Who is the investor? So on and so forth. What location it's in. Then there's the broker price opinion, which is what someone is willing to pay for it. So this building could be made out of 24 karat gold, and by itself it could be worth $1 gajillion. But what someone is willing to pay for it in a market that surrounds it, say, think of, and I'll give you an example, a very clear example, Nevada, Las Vegas, before it was Vegas, the Wynn was placed there. The Wynn in itself, the building, is going to be intrinsically very, very valuable. But the broker price opinion may come back and say, well, there's really nothing around it. There's no electricity, there's no water, there's nothing. Right? It's a very crazy example, but I wanted the people to understand that are watching what that actually means. What does it mean? What is a broker price opinion? And a broker price opinion basically says what someone is willing to pay for that building. Well, if that building is in the middle of Nevada, Las Vegas, before it was Vegas, not a lot of people, or the broker price opinion will be much smaller, arguably, than the Wynn itself, which is very, very valuable, right? That everything is working in there's top of the line, so on and so forth. I wanted to clear that up, but continue. You were talking about your inquiries.
Everybody is, if you're a banker, you want to know what the value of the property is to make a good loan or to value your existing loan.
Right.
If you're an investor like John Gray, you want to know what the value is so you don't overpay. If you're a retailer, you want to know what rent to pay. You don't want to overpay and suffer compared to your competitors. Right?
How long does that process take?
Depends. A 1 million square foot building is different from a 25 footer walk.
Give us a range.
We do these BOVs. I'll give you an example. We did an office building. The purchaser bought it 3.5 years ago for $600 million. They put a $400 million mortgage on it, and we just underwrote it 2 weeks ago. And we came back and we told the lender hired us to say, what's this building worth if we take it back in foreclosure? We came back at $180 million.
Wow.
And they said to us, really? They didn't even think it was worth that much. I know of another building that was recently foreclosed, $137 million mortgage. And most buyers are looking at it at $30 million. So there's been a tremendous loss of value. And so our job is to look forward to try and advise the lenders. We even advise appraisers, right? Because we help each other. We call them, they call us. So it's constant. It's this constant search for value because everything is always changing. You said laws are changing. A little birdie whispered in my ear, there may be this housing deal this week. The state may impose good cause eviction.
If that happens,
It's terrible. It's terrible.
why is it terrible?
It's
Wait, before we go, I just have a quick question. Last year, you're doing BOVs, like you said, you weren't making money, but you're busy. When you back checked, how'd you do?
last year.
On your opinions of values that now are established,
we did really
if you're
well.
seeing any transactions,
really
how did
well.
you do? Are you doing?
We did very
are you
well,
getting
yeah.
close to like what these numbers were trading at?
We pride ourselves on being accurate in the BOVs. I have a great team. We hired our senior analyst is from Ernst & Young, and he's a CPA, and he's a whiz with the numbers. So we're really good. And we brainstorm. Our special sauce and our team is we're in the office every day.
What makes you guys different?
We're in the office every day. There's no working from home. There's no I don't feel comfortable, which really means I have to do my laundry on Friday. There's none of that. And so you're
pounding the pavement.
I have a nice office and I can close the door if I want to call my wife or kids, but the door is always open if it's not a personal call. Guys, come on in. I'll let the younger guys come in and we brainstorm. And that's been my kind of special sauce for 20 years. Brainstorm. What is it worth? What's going on? What's changing in the city? Who are the buyers? Who, like international buyers? Who would be interested in this? Because we don't get hired unless the client thinks we can get the highest price. Of anybody else in the world, they're only going to hire us if they say, I'm comfortable with this team and I think they'll get me more money than anybody else.
And I think getting back to legal for a second, legal is, they're not coming to legal for the value. They're not coming to legal for the trouble. They're not coming to legal for the money, although we pride ourselves on being value add. So I'll give you the definition of what that means. What is value add law firm? What does that mean? We have a client right now who has a development in the city. It's in Midtown, and they have run title, and there's an easement. Okay, I won't tell you what type of easement it is. They ran title, and that easement is making it very difficult to develop. That when you go to the letter of intent or the term sheet, fancy way of saying what the capital will say will give you the money, that easement is a very, very big problem, and it's a delta between 10 or 50 million or 10 or 30 million. That's a problem. And then when you go to the value of the broker price opinion, and they were going to go say, well, what if we resell it because we're already in contract? The client's already in contract. And financing is looming. They have to buy the property. And you might say, well, why are they coming to you? Well, they might be coming to us because they want to restructure their portfolio and either go bankrupt and say, we don't want this property anymore. Give us our money back. Okay, that's really the problem. There was about $2, $3, $4, $5 million that was put into the contract. And the other side is saying, we're not going to give it to you. Due diligence has passed. Time of the essence is here, right? And what we do as a value add is we prepare our experts. So we'll go to Eric Anton, go to Eric Brody, we'll go to Dorian Lamb, and we'll say, look, I need you to examine this. I need you to examine the term sheet. I need you to examine the title. I need you to examine the value. So as attorneys at Jacobs PC, what we actually try to do is we try to amalgamate or put together all of the resources necessary to make a compelling case. And I am having trouble doing that in this market for the very reason we sat down here today, and we got there through everyone's help and Eric's help by understanding what is the value of real estate. And I think in closing today, I think we're running out of time. I think we're in closing today is we have to think about how we look at the value on a go forward basis using what has already passed. I think we have to look at value from the lens of capital stack and where that fits in. Okay, preferred equity versus common equity versus interest rates, and then how that stacks up against a title search and what title is ultimately going to say about the issues that are attendant in that title policy. So I think it's very valuable to talk about those things. I think the most valuable thing is you have to have all of us in the room. You have to have all of us in the room. And I think the developer should know that. Developer needs to know that. I think it's not a one-stop shop, although we can all say we're one-stop shops maybe because we're all resourceful. But at the end of the day, it's helping a developer. With that said, I wanted to thank everybody. Eric, thank you so much for coming in. Dorian, it was a pleasure to have you.
Leo, thank you for having me.
Eric, it's a pleasure to have you. It's amazing. And peace out till next time, boys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.